All right, everybody. If you can hear me and see me, that would be great. And if not, please let me know in the chat. And welcome to another Monday night where we're going to discuss all this SHTF that's happening all over the place. Here, there, everywhere. I don't know if that's maybe being hyperbolic, but it doesn't really feel like it anymore. So, give me 1 second here. And it looks like we have people chiming in with the 5x5 already. Laura Dow is saying, 5x5, we got Shadow Prepper here. Exile Reviews, thanks for being here. Thank you for modding. And as we get things going, we will go ahead and thank Midway USA for supporting the channel and for being the biggest supporter of the channel. And I really appreciate everything they do for me. And of course, if you didn't know, I write articles for Midway USA, so make sure you go check that out. And then also, I want to mention that Genesis Gold Group does, in fact, support every live stream we do here, and magicpreppergold.com is the place to go if you want to stabilize some of your wealth and some precious metal assets. So check out Genesis Gold Group by going to magicpreppergold.com. Tell them I sent you. They can help you out with rolling retirement accounts into gold-backed IRAs or sending precious metals directly to your front door, whatever it might be. Whatever you do with them will also help this channel and obviously get me some brass and lead to do more stuff with. Now, we have a lot of stuff to talk about tonight, and we're going to start domestically because I think that's very important. Everything that's happening in the country right now is almost predictable at this point, just based on how incompetent the current administration seems to be, or at least is being on purpose, right? Weaponized incompetence is a real thing. And then also, the fact that what's going on, especially obviously regarding Texas, can easily directly affect all of us and is currently directly affecting all of us when it comes to the surge of immigration that's happening at that southern border. So let's move into it. First up, first most. That's we're going to talk about America, okay? Governor Abbott has done some interesting things this past week. And of course, he says Texas is prepared if Biden federalizes National Guard. Now, there's been a lot of calls from the left for Biden to federalize the National Guard due to the fact that he could basically take control of the Texas State National Guard, whereas right now, Governor Abbott has control over that regiment. So, just to give you some background here, as tensions between Texas and the Biden administration continue over security at the southern border, some Democrats have called on President Joe Biden to federalize the state's National Guard. That would place the Texas National Guard under the command of Biden rather than Abbott. And of course, if you're new here, thanks for being here. All the articles we're going to talk about tonight are from this past week or even more recently as like today. And we try to just keep things relevant to preparedness. Make sure you hit subscribe, like, and all those things if that's something you're interested in doing to help out the channel. And if you're part of Replay Crew, thank you so much for always coming back and checking out what we have going on here. Those calls from the Democrats came as Abbott continues to use the National Guard to prevent U.S. Border Patrol agents from accessing the 47-acre Shelby Park and Eagle Pass. Now, a lot of people are concerned about this situation for obvious reasons, but there's also a little bit of concern based on the fact that this park is really, not overly indicative of how big the entire border is. And so there's a lot of speculation as to why so much focus is being placed on this one particular area. But that's neither here or there. What we're talking about is this tension between the federal and state governments of Texas and the United States. Appearing on conservative commentator Tucker Carlson's Uncensored show, Abbott seemed doubtful that Biden would make the move and referred to it as boneheaded. However, he said Texas is prepared if it comes to that. We are prepared in the event that the unlikely event does occur to make sure that we will be able to continue exactly what we've been doing over the past month, and that is building these barriers, he said. Biden has been urged to seize control of the National Guard by Representative Joaquin Castro, Democrat Texas, and former Texas Congressman Beto O'Rourke. The irony here is that for all of what Abbott is saying about Biden's failure in immigration, the governor literally will not allow Border Patrol agents, these federal agents under Biden's supervision, to do their job, O'Rourke recently told Spectrum News. Now, of course, obviously the job is not being done because this huge surge in illegal immigration at the southern border is unprecedented and more so being allowed. So I understand what it is that Abbott is trying to accomplish here. So let's see here. And I do want to check in here in the chat. Mike H., thanks so much for always supporting the channel. I really appreciate you. Let's see here. We've got Frank the Tank, usually on a replay. Well, now you're here and I appreciate you. All right. Now, Bobo World says Texas has fallen. WEF equals Abbott, Dan Crenshaw, Beto. You know what? There's a lot to be said about that, but as of right now, my main concern is just the tension this is creating between the federal and state governments and why this could actually have bleed over to other parts of the country regarding state sovereignty and state rights. And that's definitely a big issue that we should all be concerned about because it's something that protects us. It's part of our checks and balances in order to eliminate full control of a federal authority, right? So, this is from Jurist from January 26th. Texas governor asserts state right to self-defense in response to escalating southern border tensions. And this is to try to give you a good outline as to what's actually happening there and what it is that they invoked regarding the Constitution in order to be able to claim that an invasion was occurring and then what powers that actually gave them. Texas Governor Greg Abbott issued a statement asserting Texas's constitutional right to self-defense on Wednesday as tensions with the Biden administration over security along the U.S. southern border escalated. The statement specifically references Article 110, Clause 3 of the U.S. Constitution, which Abbott interpreted as granting Texas the authority to act unanimously against an invasion due to federal inaction. The executive branch of the United States has a constitutional duty to enforce federal laws protecting states, including immigration laws on the books right now, Governor Abbott's statement reads. President Biden has instructed his agencies to ignore federal statutes that mandate the detention of illegal immigrants. The failure of the Biden administration to fulfill the duties imposed by Article 4, Section 4 has triggered Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3. So, what does that mean? Well, I wanted to just make sure to share this with everybody so you're aware of what it was Texas was actually operating under. And that gives you a little bit more of a concept as to what you might expect in the future regarding any other outside interference in your state. Because this is in reaction to what Texas is claiming is an invasion. So consider that from any other perspective of what an invasion could possibly be, and then understand how your state might react or what they might do in response to it, right? This is something that you can learn from more so than just witness while it's occurring. So here is what Texas is claiming is, being activated basically for them right now regarding constitutional law. Okay. Clause 3 acts requiring consent of Congress. No state shall, without the consent of Congress, lay any duty of tonnage, keep troops or ships of war in time of peace, enter into any agreement or compact with another state or with a foreign power, or engage in war, unless actually invaded or in such imminent danger as will not admit of delay. So, this is what it is that Texas is standing on when it comes to legal ground. And this is what it is that they're claiming they are experiencing, okay? And as you can see right here, they can't enter into any agreement or compact with another state, right? We have states starting to send National Guard troops and assistance in many forms over to Texas right now, or with a foreign power. So that's also very interesting. So based on what Texas is currently operating under, in their interpretation of the legal sense of this entire clause, they would have a constitutional right to reach out to another country at this point in time and begin to act on their own without the necessity of federal involvement. And that's very interesting, just based on the fact that that could be Mexico, for example, or that could go all the way to anywhere else. I mean, this is a very interesting situation that we currently have on our hands there. So in reference to this, regarding states and military affairs, which I also thought was worth at least exploring here, just to give everybody, and like I said, this is Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3, just so everyone's aware of what it is we're reviewing right now. Check this out, okay? The Supreme Court has stated that this provision contemplates the use of the state's military power to put down an armed insurrection too strong to be controlled by civil authority, and held that the organization and maintenance of an active state militia is not a keeping of troops in time of peace within the prohibition of this clause. That's interesting. The Supreme Court has also held that the divestments of state power in this clause, together with Congress's express authority to build and maintain the armed forces under Article 1, Section 8, Clauses 12 and 13, reflect a complete delegation of authority to the federal government to provide for the common defense, and show that the states renounce their right to interfere with national policy in this area in the plan of the convention. So, very interesting legalese here, right? There's a lot of ways you can look at this and interpret it based on what's happening in Texas right now. But I find some of the verbiage here to be rather revealing, especially in regards to the maintenance of an active state militia not being considered the keeping of troops in time of peace, and the fact that the state's military power is able to be used to put down an armed insurrection considered to be too strong to be controlled by civil authority, aka law enforcement. So there's a lot of things in this clause that are very interesting based on the fact that that's what Texas is referencing at this point in time. Now, go ahead and jump over here. Let's see. Amaro says Alabama National Guard, been there for 3 months. Lots of National Guard regiments have actually been in Texas for a long time now. I know the North Dakota National Guard has been operating down at the southern border for quite some time. So there's been a lot of involvement down there. But now we're getting direct involvement specifically related to this particular issue, which I find to be very interesting. Good evening, Brent. Good to see you. So, what else is going on in Texas regarding this entire domestic issue? Here's something I want to kind of share with everybody and give you some things to consider, something to pause and think about when it comes to the response by the civilian side of things regarding what's going on in Texas. Texas sheriffs to trucker convoy heading to border. Don't come to Texas. So at first I'm like, okay, so what's going on here? Do we have oppositional sheriffs here that are just upset about the idea of the American people trying to come support? Is there other things to consider here regarding possible honeypots, right? Levels of different traps that might be being set based on, historical precedent and everything else. But some interesting things here. First thing is that this is an ad that they're showing you right here. And it's how cartels actually recruit drivers for human smuggling operations, right? Need someone who can drive an 18-wheeler right now. Now McAllen to Houston, already ready, $70,000, right? And that got me thinking, okay, maybe there's a little bit more to this. Texas sheriffs and some residents have a message for a trucker convoy scheduled to come to Texas border on February 3rd. Don't come. Organizer of the Take Our Border Back Southern Border Convoy and three-state rally are calling in all active and retired law enforcement and military, veterans, mama bears, elected officials, business owners, ranchers, truckers, bikers, media, and law-abiding, freedom-loving Americans to travel to rural, hard-to-reach areas near Eagle Pass, Texas, Yuma, Arizona, and San Ysidro, California. The convoy is expected to follow a route from Virginia Beach south through Jacksonville, Florida, and west along I-10 to Houston, south on Highway 35 from San Antonio, which Texas sheriffs know are major human and drug smuggling corridors, and criminals could capitalize on their efforts. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, and this is where my strange brain begins to start turning the gears, let's just say, okay? The group's stated objective is to assemble in honor of our U.S. Constitution and Bill of Rights to express support to secure the southern border. Its GoFundMe page has raised more than $130,000, none of which goes to state or federal border security efforts. Social media posts indicate some joining the convoy will be armed. In response, Goliad Sheriff Roy Boyd, that's a hard one to say, that must have been great in school, who leads an Operation Lone Star task force along a major smuggling corridor, is urging the convoy not to come to Texas. Now listen to this, and this is something that you could consider outside of the scope of what they're actually discussing here, right? If the desire of protests like the convoy are to make an impactful difference, there are better ways to do so, Boyd told the Center Square. Unfortunately, driving to a border town is not the best way to make an impact. If a group wants to bring attention for the mainstream media to report on the protest, the convoy would be better off showing up on the streets of New York City or Washington, D.C. The convoy will impede law enforcement efforts that have been targeting 18-wheeler and other truck drivers smuggling people from the border, he and others say. Increased traffic, especially commercial vehicle traffic, works to the benefit of smuggling organizations by providing them with more opportunities to blend in while reducing the likelihood of loads being stopped, Boyd said. The OLS task force first shared with the Center Square how cartel operatives are advertising online, paying drivers $70,000 to smuggle more than 80 people per truckload from the border, and how they're actively working to catch them. OLS Task Force Jackson County Sheriff Kelly Janica told the Center Square, "We appreciate anyone supporting securing the border, but please don't come here. It will make our job harder. The cartels will capitalize on this and use the 18-wheelers, which they are already doing, to smuggle people from the border." Okay? Now, When I read that at first, I was like, okay, I get it. There's always going to be some level of opposition to protest and into any movement and everything else. And of course, like I said, this definitely has the feelings of a possible honeypot type scenario. But another consideration to make here is that if the cartels would seize upon this opportunity to try to smuggle more people across the border based on using semi-trucks, what other groups are currently active at the southern border that could use this as an opportunity to move something with a semi-truck? And then I started thinking about what types of things could be moved by a semi-truck that could be potentially dangerous to the American population. And then I also started to consider how these truck driver protests and convoys could then be blamed for whatever scenario unfolds thereafter, saying that they actually ran cover for these groups, whether or not it was by design or if it was just through ignorance. And it all starts to kind of feel like maybe there's more to this that is worse than we know or could be used to be worse than we know. I don't like to assume those things are going to happen, but I have to at least consider the possibility. And if law enforcement there is worried about the cartels using this convoy as a way to move more people illegally into the country by using semi-trucks, then you have to assume somebody else might be aware of the fact that this would be a good time to move a semi-truck load of something that they're not supposed to have into the United States. And that's as far as I want to take that, because this is obviously speculation on my part, but we have to consider things like that at this point in time based on where we're at in this global conflict scenario that we're currently watching unfold. And I definitely feel like this is a potential issue that we're facing right now, and that this convoy could potentially be used for that level of cover, especially knowing that they can fit 80 people inside of one of these trucks, which is also a potential issue. Okay. So, Texas has a lot going on. We should pay attention to it for a few things. Dustin Pribble says smoke screen. Chris R says truckers could just drive their rigs without the trailers. Problem solved. I mean, quite possibly, right? There's a lot of ways to approach that, but I'm not sure how you organize that, because I think the estimate as of right now is that there's going to be upwards of 700,000 people expected to be moving down towards the southern border at this point in time, which is chaos. It just is. No matter how well organized this event is, that's a lot of people. And the cartels are very well organized, very well funded, and aren't handcuffed by any legislation, right? They don't have any rules of engagement to concern themselves with. So they're going to operate with impunity during that time if it behooves them to do so. Ben Jamin says, could be full of Twinkies. I agree. But unfortunately, it's always snowballs. So, pay attention to Texas. If this spills over, it could be bad for a lot of us, because states are going to start taking a stance based on what they feel they should have the ability to do in the sense of sovereignty from the federal government. And if the federal government feels like it's losing control, that could move us into a new territory as well. And one state's National Guard could get federalized, and then another state's National Guard could get federalized. And then what can National Guard troops be used for? Obviously, the thing that's a big concern for everybody in the preparedness community would be martial law, right? Especially if things get out of hand, especially if you have 700,000 people ascending on this, or descending. I'm not really sure how we're going to say that based on location, but either way, heading towards this very, very small town at a national security compromised southern border, right? There's a lot of ways this could go very badly. And that's something that you should just, at least at this point in time, consider as a possible outcome. I think we all, as prepared people, we want to remain safe. We want our country to be secure. And so I think most of us have this concept in mind that having a secure southern border is a better idea than not having a secure southern border, right? But the issues that are coming up right now between the states and the federal government is very concerning as well. It's more concerning now. Like, it was already very concerning. Now it's creating even additional tensions. And of course, I'm not saying what Texas is doing is wrong. I understand the need to secure the border, but what I'm saying is that there's a lot of things that can go wrong throughout this process. So, the convoy is headed to 3 cities and 3 states, says Texas Gals Prepping. Okay, good to know. Zach Maruda, the cartels work with China. You know what? I've been saying it for a long time now, and it's very, very true. Keep that in mind. They're always behind something, okay? And then we have James Ahmed. I thought you were better than this. Get your facts right. Well, I would love to know what facts I have wrong there, James, because I'm just putting things out there at this point in time, okay? It's not a trucker convoy, right? Okay. Then what is it, James? Because I'm just telling you what's being reported on right now, okay? Anyway, it's organized protest that has truckers involved. Call it whatever you want. All right, let's move on. And honestly, what it's called doesn't really matter at this point in time. There's a lot of other things that are much more important than what we're calling these things and what they're being labeled as. Let's talk about what's happening in other parts of the world, okay? Biden faces pressure to strike Iran after U.S. troops are killed. This is now the SHTF that's there. We just talked about the SHTF that's here and how that can explode and escalate into something much worse. But what's happening in the Middle East? Well, some of those who are in Congress and the Senate and have been political swamp creatures for quite some time are probably getting their wishes granted finally. And that's very problematic because that would mean war in the Middle East, which is what they love to see happen, especially with Iran. Okay. And James, I hope you know I'm not picking on you. I just want to know what it is that that is wrong. It's a bunch of people. It's take back our border. Stop trying to blame us truckers. Okay, James, if truckers are going there, though, that's what the sheriffs are worried about. I don't know what to tell you, man. I'm not saying it's your fault. I'm just saying that this is what's being put out there, okay? I'm not blaming truckers. I promise you that. I'm just saying what the concerns are at this point in time. Okay. The killing of 3 U.S. troops and wounding of dozens more on Sunday by Iran-backed militants is piling political pressure on President Joe Biden to deal a blow directly against Iran, a move he's been reluctant to do out of fear of igniting a broader war. Biden's response options could range anywhere from targeting Iranian forces outside to even inside Iran, or opting for a more cautious retaliatory attack solely against the Iran-backed militants responsible, experts say. Now, I will say this. As of right now, none of our retaliatory attacks have done a thing. They haven't stopped the Houthis from launching missiles into the Red Sea. They haven't stopped any of these Iran-backed proxy militants from doing anything that they continue to do in Iraq and Syria. Obviously, Hezbollah is still mobilizing. Hamas is still, actively engaging in combat. There's nothing we're doing is stopping any of this escalation. So obviously what we have to do either needs to change or I guess just cease to exist. I'm not sure. I don't want to see war escalate in the Middle East, but I also understand that we can't just let our troops be sitting ducks. They deserve to be, under some level of protection, right? Regardless of how you feel about our operations over in other parts of the world, our soldiers that signed up to volunteer to serve this nation don't deserve to just be picked off because we don't make decisions anymore, right? American forces in the Middle East have been attacked more than 150 times by Iran-backed forces in Iraq, Syria, Jordan, and off the coast of Yemen since the Israel-Hamas war erupted in October. But until Sunday's attack on a remote outpost known as Tower 22 near Jordan's northeastern border with Syria, the strikes had not killed U.S. troops nor wounded so many. That allowed Biden the political space to mete out U.S. retaliation, inflicting costs on Iran-backed forces without risking a direct war with Tehran. Biden said the United States would respond without giving any more details. Republicans accused Biden of letting American forces become sitting ducks, waiting for the day when a drone or a missile would evade base defenses. They say that day came on Sunday when a single one-way attack drone struck near base barracks early in the morning. In response, they say Biden must strike Iran. This is definitely a concern, and this could possibly happen tonight. There's a lot of speculation that these things are going to happen tonight. And I know there's a lot of people concerned about, keeping an eye on what's happening over there right now because of just how vitriolic this situation can become very, very quickly, okay? So just be aware, this could possibly go down right now, for all we know. If that happens and I get alerted to it, let me know. I will do my best to cover it. But as of right now, we're going to just talk about everything that's leading up to this possible imminent situation. He left our troops as sitting ducks, said Republican U.S. Senator Tom Cotton. The only answer to these attacks must be devastating military retaliation against Iran's terrorist forces, both in Iran and across the Middle East. These war hawks in Congress want to do this now. They want to do this now. The Republican who leads the U.S. Military Oversight Committee in the House of Representatives, Representative Mike Rogers, also called for action against Tehran. It's long past time for President Biden to finally hold the terrorist Iranian regime and their extremist proxies accountable for the attacks they've carried out, Rogers said. Former President Donald Trump, who hopes to face off against Biden in this year's presidential election, portrayed the attack as a consequence of Joe Biden's weakness and surrender. The Biden administration has said that it goes to great lengths to protect U.S. troops around the world. Well, clearly not so great. One Democrat openly voiced concern that Biden's strategy of containing the Israel-Hamas conflict to Gaza was failing. As we see now, it's spiraling out of control. It's beginning to emerge as a regional war, and unfortunately, the United States and our troops are in harm's way, Democratic Representative Barbara Lee said, renewing calls for a ceasefire in the Israel-Palestinian war. Okay, so this is an issue, a huge issue. Now, how did this attack even occur? Well, this is something that you should pay attention to, at least to a degree, because either this is what happened or it was coincidental, but either way, it shows that this was capable, which means that we could see copycat attacks start occurring here into the future, regardless of whether or not it was intentional to begin with. And this is where things get really interesting, at least in my opinion. Hey, Northern Girl Hobbies, thanks for being here. Thank you for modding and taking care of me over here. I really appreciate that. Let's see here. The Watchman says, everything is good cop, bad cop to keep us watching the greatest show as they dismantle and destroy. We have sheriffs on the payroll. Only thing for them to not do their jobs for decades now. Yeah, I mean, stuff just happens. This is what is going on. I understand. Let's see here. Buy rice, buy bullets, and recognize how beautiful Magic Prepper is with his white streak of hair. All right, Andrew Valenta. Well, I appreciate that. I started reading that a little bit too soon, I think. All right. Anyway. All right, let's keep moving forward. This is interesting. Drone that killed U.S. soldiers in Jordan followed American drone onto base, causing confusion. Okay. Now listen to this and the way it's stated, because this is could be problematic. The drone that killed 3 U.S. Army soldiers and wounded dozens more in Jordan on Sunday approached the U.S. military outpost Tower 22 around the same time an American drone was returning to the base, which led to uncertainty over whether it was hostile and caused a delay to the U.S. response, 2 U.S. officials told CNN. The enemy drone followed the American drone as it approached, but it is not clear whether the enemy drone intentionally followed the American one or if it was coincidence. One of the officials said, U.S. officials are still assessing the enemy drone's point of origin. The Wall Street Journal first reported the confusion over the enemy drone. The 3 U.S. soldiers killed in the attack were identified Monday as Sergeant William Rivers, 46, of Carrollton, Georgia, Specialist Kennedy Sanders, 24, of Waycross, Georgia, and Specialist Brianna Moffitt, 23, of Savannah, Georgia, according to the Defense Department. They were all assigned to the 718th Engineer Company, a U.S. Army Reserve unit based out of Fort Moore, Georgia, Pentagon Deputy Press Secretary Sabrina Singh said at a briefing. Singh said more than 40 were injured in the attack, a number that could possibly continue to increase. Now understand, first off, we lost those 3 American soldiers in this attack, which is a huge escalation compared to anything else that's happened since or before, right? Like this is not usual, right? And then at the same time, more than 40 are injured. So this is a significant attack. This is not something that you can just let go unpunished per se. But this attack is also being used clearly to push us into a direct conflict with Iran, which people like Lindsey Graham have been asking for decades. And the other thing to keep in mind is that this particular article we're reporting here in the U.S., we're telling our enemies and everyone that this drone followed an American drone in, which is what caused the confusion and why it was so capable of being able to deliver its payload. But we're not sure if it was coincidental or not. Well, great. Now we just told all of our enemies that have the capability of using drones that all you got to do is just follow one of our drones in, and then you're good to go. So I don't know what kind of countermeasures or what kind of SOPs are going to be put into place in order to avoid this from happening in the future. But as of right now, it sounds like there's a giant billboard being painted in the Middle East that just basically says, follow a drone and you'll get where you want to go. So this is a big issue, and this is a huge loss for the American military. All right. Radar operator job opening, also no IFF. Yeah. I mean, Rob Sinelli, I don't know what led to it, but I mean, this is huge. And this was definitely a lot of failures of intelligence that led to this, of course, but also just goes to show with enough time, patience, and planning and strategy, even the most, guerrilla style of elements can succeed in an attack. We've learned that throughout the Ukraine conflict, and we're learning that now, even when it comes to the American military, right? We have all the technology, we have all the assets, we have all the defense mechanisms in place, and these Iranian-backed proxy militants are just throwing drones right into one of our bases. To Dr. Homestead, thank you so much. I really appreciate that, and thank you for all you do as well. So, now interestingly enough, Silence, I'm not sure why I don't see your comment in the chat, but I did see it on my other integration, and you said, well, where'd it go? It might have disappeared. There we go. Sure seems like evil forces are trying to deceive with the hopes we will destroy ourselves. And I think that's a big, big part of it. I think that we are being deceived in order to divide ourselves and destroy ourselves in the process 100%. I think you're spot on with that one. Now, okay, let's move on. Let's see. We got everybody here chiming in. I appreciate it. David Senia about Texas. I agree that Texas has a right to defend its constituents, and it's doing what it thinks is best for the people of Texas. I don't know what else to say. I don't think Texas should have got to the point where they had to even make that decision. So this is a very vitriolic and troubling scenario that we're all dealing with, and it's only going to become more problematic as time moves on. And so I'm not sure how this remedies, in all honesty. Now, this is really interesting. The Houthis say they attacked a U.S. warship, but the American officials on our side are claiming that it's false, that didn't actually happen. And so we're seeing what happened in Jordan to our troops, right, at Tower 22. We're seeing what's happening in the Red Sea. I mean, missiles have been lobbed at our ships as well as shipping ships or cargo ships for months now. And so now the Houthis are saying, yeah, we attacked a U.S. warship. And we're just saying, no, they didn't. I mean, I don't know who to believe in these situations, but I'm also concerned about the fact that we would be denying something that has, a reasonable case of being true. I mean, this isn't something that's improbable. They've been lobbing missiles at our ships for days on end. I'm very confused by this, to be honest with you. So I think this is something worth at least exploring a little bit. And just goes to show you how dangerous everything in the Red Sea is becoming and how dangerous that entire arena is becoming when it comes to the Middle Eastern theater right now. Yemen's Houthi rebels said they attacked a U.S. Navy mobile base at sea on Monday without offering evidence, something immediately rejected by an American defense official. Interesting. Houthi military spokesperson, Brigadier General Yahya Saree, claimed the group fired a missile at the USS Louis B. Puller in the Gulf of Aden. The Puller, which serves as a floating landing base, had been earlier stationed in the Arabian Sea as part of American efforts to curtail Houthi attacks on commercial shipping through the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden. Houthi attacks will continue until the aggression is stopped and the siege is lifted on the people of Palestine and the Gaza Strip, Saree said in a statement. A U.S. defense official, speaking on condition of anonymity to discuss intelligence matters, said there had been no reported attack on the Puller. However, the Houthis have previously launched missiles that did not reach their intended target, instead crashing into the land or sea. The Puller served as a mobile base for the U.S. Navy SEALs, who conducted a January 11th operation seizing Iranian-made ballistic missile and cruise missile components believed to be bound for Yemen. 2 SEALs went missing in the operation and are presumed to have died. Since November, the rebels have repeatedly targeted ships in the Red Sea over Israel's offensive in Gaza against Hamas, but they have frequently targeted vessels with tenuous or no clear links to Israel, imperiling shipping in a key route for global trade between Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. Okay, so they're hitting ships. They've done all kinds of stuff in the Red Sea, and now they're saying, look, we attacked an American Navy ship, and we're saying they didn't. So I'm not sure what the strategy there is, possibly. I mean, maybe they didn't. Maybe it is completely 100% accurate that they just didn't do it. They're just saying they did for no reason other than the fact that they want to say they did to look good in front of all of their friends, right? I'm not sure. But I could also see our military not wanting to admit that these things are happening because they haven't been given any sort of green light yet to actually respond or retaliate in any meaningful way. And it's very possible that what we're seeing right now is us trying to save face as much as possible because those who are in charge right now that make the decisions as to whether or not we go into kinetic action with some of these groups don't want us to. So I'm not sure if they're either sympathizers to some degree, collaborators possibly even, or if they're awaiting a much larger response to be authorized, let's just say, right? So I'm not sure what's happening there, but you guys let me know in the chat what you think is going on. But it's very interesting that that we're just denying an attack happened when they're saying it did. I would find that to be odd at the very least. It's very odd. Briar Patch says there's no turning back now, and I have to agree with you here. We are going to be in a war, a hot conflict in the Middle East, and it's going to be public at some point in time rather than just proxy, which it is right now. Let's see here. Viv B, some days I wish I was ignorant of all this and just a sheeple. I understand that too. Some days I would like to just sit back, relax, and veg out on TV or something, right? But in all honesty, prepping and being aware of what's happening in the world gives me a peace of mind that I think is valuable to the point of wanting to continue to do what I do. It just makes me feel like I can provide my family with something greater than just ignorance in the form of bliss until that bliss turns to something much worse if things fall apart suddenly, right? We have that awareness about us to know that if something goes wrong, we'll be okay. Versus people who don't even think about something going wrong, and when it does go wrong, they will not be okay because there is no planning at all being done. So, Steel Penny, no matter what they say, we are screwed. All right, well, we'll see what we can do, all right? Now, just so you're aware, this whole Middle East thing is not going away anytime soon. Responsible Statecraft reports 4 days ago that U.S. Marines deployment in the Middle East is likely extended, okay? Despite the White House parsing whether the U.S. is in a war or not, right? And this is something that's happening from the White House right now. They will not admit that we're currently in combat even. They're just saying that they're having these, military actions, special operations, just like Russia's invasion of Ukraine is just a special operation. The Pentagon is mulling whether to extend the deployment of an existing amphibious ready group now stationed in the Middle East, according to reports, as attacks by Houthis and subsequent retaliations increase. Yes, they do. According to military.com, the group includes the USS Bataan, USS Carter Hall, and USS Mesa Verde, and has been operating in the Middle East and the Mediterranean since the summer. ARG also includes aircraft and about 2,000 Marines as part of the 26th Marine Expeditionary Unit, according to the online magazine. As naval warships with anti-missile batteries have been engaging directly with Houthis in the Red Sea, the USS Bataan has been trawling the waters of the Red Sea, Strait of Hormuz, and Mediterranean as a warning to disruptive actors in the area while being ready to help in an emergency. So, they are planning on extending their stay in the Middle East. And just so you're all aware, just in the sense of how ready we are to just start another military tour over there. All told, the U.S. military has about 30,000 service members currently deployed in the Middle East, which includes its permanent bases in Kuwait, Qatar, and Bahrain. The USS Ford Carrier Group returned to the U.S. this month on regular rotation, leaving the USS Eisenhower Carrier Strike Group in the Red Sea with about 7,500 personnel. Okay. So, the Middle East is also very much SHTF over there. It's just kind of everywhere. I'm not really sure what we're doing, but I am sure that it's only going to get worse. And I wish I wasn't sure about that, but it's very clear to me that this is escalating towards direct conflict with another country, and Iran is in the crosshairs. Now, Iran has allies, including Russia, and that can obviously lead to larger scale conflict. And then we also know that Israel and Iran are very, let's just say, angry at each other, and Israel has nuclear capabilities. Iran technically does not, but probably has access to them. So things are getting very, very strange. What else is going on regarding naval ships and movements and everything else that should probably be on our radar? Well, China just recently sent several warplanes and Navy ships toward Taiwan after the U.S.-China talks that just recently happened. The story is from January 27th, so 2 days ago. Taiwan's defense ministry announced on Saturday that over 30 Chinese warplanes were headed towards its country, in addition to Navy ships. 33 aircraft were sent by the Chinese People's Liberation Army from 6 a.m. Friday to 6 a.m. Saturday, officials said. The aircraft included Su-30 fighters. 6 Chinese naval vessels were also headed to Taiwan, and 13 of China's warplanes crossed the median of the Taiwan Strait. According to the Associated Press, Taiwanese officials are currently monitoring the situation. Saturday's development happened shortly after senior U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi agreed to meet in Bangkok. Sullivan announced the end of the talks on X Saturday evening. Just finished 2 days of meetings with Director Wang Yi in Bangkok to follow up on the Woodside Summit between President Biden and President Xi last November, the Post read, which included a photo of Sullivan and Wang shaking hands. National Security Council spokesperson Adrian Watson said that Sullivan and Wang's meeting continues the commitment by both sides to maintain strategic communication and responsibly manage the relationship. So this happened. They're having a meeting about trying to improve relations, and simultaneously 30 warplanes and 6 naval ships are heading right towards Taiwan. That can't get any worse, right? Well, here's the thing. What about space? Do you think that space could be an issue for us anytime soon? I have a feeling it could be. So, Tactical Matt Foley says, what's wrong with Biden? Have you tried turning him off and back on again? Well, the real trick is that you have to switch which clone you're using. So once we get to that point, we can figure out what clone has the best competency and then try to push that one to be a little bit more forefront. But let's go space for a second, okay? This is where things are getting interesting as well. And I want to share this report with everybody, which I will do here shortly. But there's a report that just came out about space warfare and concerns that we have moving forward into the future. Very interesting, all this is coming out right now. But I thought it was worth looking at, especially because, I don't know, terms like orbital bombardment are being used and thrown around. I don't know. New Spock commander highlights destabilizing acts by Russia and China in space. And of course, that's Space Operations Command, but I think Spock is appropriate for this. Space weapons being developed by China and Russia this week pose a threat to the U.S., according to the new head of Space Operations Command and a new report co-produced by the National Space Intelligence Center. Speaking with the Space Force Association just a few days after he officially took command of Spock, Lieutenant General David N. Miller Jr. said that in his previous job as Director of Operations for U.S. Space Command, 2 events stood out in his memory as indicative of how space has become more challenging. The first came in the summer of 2021 when China launched a fractional orbital bombardment system with hypersonic glide vehicle, incorporating concepts from an old Soviet Union system. I think that this is a particularly destabilizing capability. That is a potential for an adversary to launch potentially a nuclear payload into orbit, leave it there for some period of time, and then deorbit it whenever they feel like, Miller explained. In this case, it was back into the People's Republic of China. That's a pretty destabilizing capability. And I think that is something that while we've begun to restore military to military communications, those are not activities that promote stability and security globally. A few months later, Russia tested a direct ascent anti-satellite missile against one of its own spacecraft, creating thousands of pieces of debris in orbit. Both incidents were also highlighted in a new report produced by the National Space Intelligence Center and National Airspace Intelligence Center titled Competing in Space. A previous edition of the report was published in December 2018, but in the 6 years since, the number of threats and targets in space have multiplied. By the way, 2018 was 6 years ago. 6 years ago. 2018 was closer to 2020 than we are now. That's how weird everything has been since, right? I just don't even know what to say about it. So, space issues, definitely a problem. Here's the new space report. And I want to show everybody it for a second. We're just going to kind of glide through this really quickly. But I find it really interesting and also pretty concerning in all honesty. And I'm going to share this right now in the chat. So if you guys want to look at it on your own, feel free. But then I'm also going to post it in the pinned comment after the live stream is over. So that way everyone has access to it there too. I think it's worth at least looking. Yes, it looks like it's something that came out of a 1990s popular mechanics magazine or something like that. But still, this is all pretty interesting, okay? Now, let me get you down here to a couple of the things that I think are relevant to where we are right now, okay? All right, if I can just get this to work. It's also on a 1990s computer, apparently. It just really doesn't want to cooperate, okay? Multi-domain warfare. This entire section talks about all the space capabilities that have been developed by our adversaries to launch a multi-domain warfare campaign using space weaponry. We have space-enabled warfare, counter-space warfare, and like I said, orbital bombardment, which is very concerning and obviously something that our Space Force is concerned about. We have space debris causing problems, of course, as well. But then we also have resource exploitation, all kinds of stuff in here that I think is definitely worth at least taking a look at. But one thing that I wanted to find, which is just evading me right now, because this thing is just not very well organized. All right. There we go. Come on. Come on. We can do it. There we go. This must be from like an iMac. I don't even know what to say. But here we are. Denying space. As our world grows increasingly dependent upon space services, potential adversaries are developing technologies and fielding terrestrial and space-based counter-space weapons capable of destroying satellites, disrupting space services, and degrading support infrastructure on the ground. All these things are being put into place right now because in this day and age, in 2024, if you were to have a successful military campaign against a superpower like the United States of America, you would have to consider their space technology and their space networking as part of their communications program, which would then need to be, I would assume, destroyed or at least handicapped to a degree, right? So we have directed energy weapons being told right here. China has multiple ground-based laser systems of varying power levels that could blind or damage satellite sensors. By the mid to late 2020s, Beijing may have higher power systems capable of damaging satellites. Interesting. Direct energy weapons. We're just going to keep talking about that as if we've never seen anything like that before. Anti-satellite missiles, ground site attacks, electronic warfare. I mean, they're talking about everything. China's developing satellite inspection and repair systems that could function as weapons and has launched multiple satellites to test orbital maintenance and debris mitigation. We have kinetic kill vehicles, which are used for destroying satellites, robotic systems, electronic warfare, everything. So make sure you check out that report. But I found it to be very interesting and also concerning based on, recent activities and things that our adversaries are currently engaged in. Like, I don't know, maybe Iran launching 3 satellites simultaneously into orbit amid tensions with the West that just happened yesterday. What? Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Why would they constantly need to be launching satellites? They're not preparing for Comcast cable, I don't think. Maybe they are. Maybe they just really like some good stuff. Savage Lee, thanks for being here. I appreciate you. You have a good night. All right. Iran launches 3 satellites simultaneously into orbit. It has successfully launched 3 indigenous satellites into orbit using the Simorgh carrier rocket, marking the first time the country has simultaneously sent 3 satellites into space, reports Anadolu Agency. The satellites, launched early on Sunday, include Madha, weighing 32 kilograms, and 2 nanosatellites, Kihan-2 and Hatef-1, of less than 10 kilograms, sent to a minimum orbit of 450 kilometers and a maximum of 1,100 kilometers, state media reported, citing the public relations wing of the Defense Ministry. The Simorgh satellite carrier that carried the 3 satellites to space has been developed by Iran's Defense Ministry, the ministry statement noted. So you're aware, they want to make sure you're aware that these are related to their military. Madha satellite has been described as a research satellite whose design, construction, assembly, and testing stages were carried out at Iran's Space Research Institute. It aims to test the accuracy of the Simorgh carrier in delivering multiple cargoes in low Earth orbit and to evaluate the performance of new designs and the reliability of indigenous space technologies. Kihan-2 and Hatef-1 nanosatellites have been developed by Iran Electronics Industries, a state-owned subsidiary of the Defense Ministry, both meant to test the country's space technology. The first of its kind launch came a day after Iran dismissed the criticism of the European Troika on the launch of another satellite last week, saying the scientific progress is an inalienable and legitimate right of the country. So, just be aware. They're launching satellites into space for whatever purpose they might have. Now, Iran, like I said, is obviously highly involved with countries like Russia. And this was an interesting take that I thought was worth sharing because I think there's probably some truth to this. And you guys can let me know if you want, but this is just where we are, okay? Iranian official visiting Moscow says U.S. grandeur shattered. U.S. grandeur has been shattered in the Middle East, Secretary of Iran's National Security Council Ali Akbar Ahmadian stated during a visit to Moscow on Wednesday. Ahmadian, who is a representative of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei at the Security Council, held a meeting with the Secretary of Russia's Security Council, Nikolai Patrushev. He told his Russian counterpart, America's grandeur has shattered, and today it cannot even rally its traditional allies. A country that considers itself a superpower is engaged in war against resistance groups and the people of the region. Okay? That might have some validity to it, right? We're a superpower, but these Houthi rebels launching rockets at our ships, we just can't deal with them. Not much to do about it, I guess. And, Iranian-backed proxy militants launching drones into our bases and actually killing American soldiers. Yeah, I guess they just do that now, right? The grandeur situation's an issue. Because once you've lost the fear, then all it does is embolden further attacks. This is not how things are supposed to work, but this is what they're doing, okay? Now, speaking of Moscow, we have to at least address that elephant as well, because it doesn't just go away. All the attention is being pulled to the Middle East, but Russia is still doing stuff in Europe. This is still happening, right? And that still has the potential of a lot of different things going wrong, especially regarding the use of nuclear weapons. And I know it's old news at this point, but it just keeps going. It's not going away. It's happening more. Putin could strike targets across Europe in all-out war against the West, generals say. Top NATO generals have warned that Vladimir Putin may strike targets across Europe in all-out war against the West. Now, here's a couple things that I would keep in mind when I'm reading articles like this one. What's the purpose behind this? Okay, are they wanting to generate more military aid for NATO in general, right? Do they want to get more aid and more resources in order to keep the military-industrial complex going, right? Or are they actually concerned about a war with Russia? Is this something that they are actually afraid of and they want everyone to be aware that this could actually happen? Or do they want a war with Russia and they're just preparing people for it now by stating these things and hoping that people will assume that they're accurate, and then when anything occurs, they'll say, we told you so, now we have to go to that war we said was going to happen. There's a lot of ways this could go, and I have to consider all those different possibilities when we talk about this information, because I'm just not really sure what they're trying to push in the sense of a narrative at this point in time. But I always try to consider all those different perspectives just in case. Leaders told the Times that the bloc may have as little as 3 years to prepare for a potential Russian offensive on European land, which would see strikes against civilian and military infrastructure deep behind the front lines in order to hamper war efforts. They said Germany would likely be singled out as the central turntable for NATO's continental supply lines, and that targets could range from munitions factories and command centers to power plants, railways, and bridges. Russia has already used similar tactics during its invasion of Ukraine, launching missiles far into Ukrainian territory, while Ukraine itself has retaliated by taking out ammo dumps, fuel depots, and command sites. Lieutenant General Alexander Solfrank, commander of NATO's Military Logistics Center in southwest Germany, said if we compare war and operations 10 years ago or 5 years ago, then we realize that we have to accept that also the rear areas will severely be contested. We have to assume that an aggressor will use the whole spectrum of kinetic and non-kinetic force in order to destroy lines of communication also in the rear area, or maybe even in space, right? That ranges from acts of sabotage through electronic warfare and cyber to kinetic possibilities through missiles, drones, and so on. The NATO general urged world leaders to cut red tape that hinders countries' ability to use weapons and technologies from another weapon or another nation. Solfrank said that the rules of who can use what equipment, known as interchangeability, massively slowed down response times. He gave an example of paratroopers being legally forbidden from using parachutes made from another nation's army, even if they are functionally identical. Although it might not be allowed right now, technically there's no problem in many cases. Where's the problem, for example, with a paratrooper from a European nation A, using a parachute from a neighboring nation, B, after having been trained on this system, or attaching equipment from one nation to the helicopter of another nation? If there is no technical or security issue, why not, he asked. He said reducing the bureaucracy seemingly inherent to multinational organizations would be key to ensuring that NATO is agile enough to fight Russia. I think we can get this started and reduce or adapt the red tape or whatever it might be possible and necessary, Solfrank said, adding, everyone can start. Just do it and don't wait, because in the end we have no time to waste. Lieutenant General Jan William Maas, chief of the Dutch Armed Forces Defense Support Command, agreed that preparations for a bloc-wide conflict needed to go further. We are not where we should be, that's clear, he said. But the question is, what are we going to do about it? If you look at what Putin has done until now, I think that we have a way better starting position for the next operations. If you look at how Europe was united after he invaded Ukraine, I'm not that pessimistic. Excuse me. Okay. So, there's a lot going on. And like I said, you can't rule out what's happening in Eastern Europe just because it hasn't done that yet, right? All right. Let's see here. So, Billy Badass 411 the first. I appreciate that you enjoy the information I'm sharing here. Look, I do my best to try to make it relevant, and I do my best to try to make it well-rounded, but it's easy to miss things, and it's also easy to misinterpret things. So I also encourage everyone in the chat to make sure they voice their opinion as well, and of course keep it cordial so that it can actually be posted, as there is a very strong, let's just say, sort of restriction on this platform regarding what you can or can't post in the comments or in the live chat. But in regards to everything that's happening, I think we can all at least agree that things are rough right now. And I don't really know how to get through to certain people at this point in time, okay? Uncle Charlie, I love how much of the Spaceballs references are going through tonight, and I can appreciate that because, you know what? It's an excellent movie, and that was from an excellent time where we could still laugh at things and have a good time, right? But things are definitely moving towards a hot war, a publicly hot war. No more proxy stuff. If we attack Iran, which is highly possible, possibly even happening tonight for all I know, then there's a good chance things get out of hold. They get crazy, right? But I don't know if that's what's going to happen or not. And in all honesty, I don't really trust this administration to do a whole lot in general. I don't know. I just don't. I personally am not really sure what we're doing right now. When I say that, I mean that in the sense of, like, what are we doing? You know, like how are we protecting our troops? How are we making any sense when it comes to protecting our borders? We're not doing anything very well right now at all, which doesn't give me a lot of hope, because if we did go into a hot conflict scenario right this second, the people who are making decisions in this country right now don't seem to have all their ducks in a row. I just don't know. So, we have too many sheep and/or useful idiots, says Oki Khan. And that's likely true. But the other thing to keep in mind there too is that not everyone is required to be informed about what's happening, because, you know, one of the perks of living in a constitutional republic is supposed to be that you elect people to make some of these important decisions that have your interests in mind and are smart enough to make a better decision than maybe you would be able to, right? Like, that's one of the benefits of a constitutional republic over a true democracy. A true democracy would be very dangerous. You know, you would have majority rule of the less informed, most likely. But at this point in time, our constitutional republic has moved away from great minds and moved more towards lobbyist-backed plants who are there to push towards profit. I don't know what else to say. I mean, that's just where we're at. So here we are. I just think the best thing we can do is to keep prepping, which is what we always say, right? But I mean, it's just true. And I just want you to think of a couple things, okay? If everything blows up like tomorrow, right? Like we have conflicts erupt in the Middle East that are direct kinetic action conflicts with the United States. China just invades Taiwan all of a sudden. Russia decides to use like a tactical nuclear weapon. All this stuff happens all at once, right? If that happens tomorrow and global trade comes to a halt and everything shoots through the roof when it comes to cost, I just want you to think what it is you would have to prioritize to acquire before everything else, right? So what's the most important thing for you to have to actually get before the doors are shut? and then at least know what that thing is, even if it becomes unobtainable. If that's a full tank of gas, then you're probably in a very good spot, because I'm sure for a lot of people there's a lot more on the list than just that. For example, like I personally need to get some dental work done. I just have a tooth that I realized probably needs to be looked at, and I got to get in and do that. But when you live in a small town in a rural part of the country, you don't get to just go to the dentist next day, right? So these are things I'm trying to get put together, but hopefully I can get all that done before things really get worse, right? So these are the things you want to consider, and these are the things I hope that you're pushing towards. You know, as a community, we got to take care of each other. So I am doing the private live stream tonight for members. So if you're a YouTube channel member or a Subscribe Star member, make sure you come hang out. That link will be posted on my channel page in the community tab, where you can find the link to that if you're a member, as well as on the Subscribe Star page, which if you want to join Subscribe Star, I will go ahead and put that in the chat right now. It's $5 a month. I got preparedness incentives. We talk, we chat. There's exclusive content, and we have the private live streams. Bees Nuts, good to see you. I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad I got to say your name. And honestly, being aware of this information is important, but don't let it prevent you from moving forward. Always progress until you can't any longer. People will say that quite often to justify maybe a reason for why they can't enhance their situation. But my, I guess, advice for anybody out there that's struggling with how to get further ahead and how to keep preparing while things are getting harder and harder to accomplish, right, is keep progressing. Don't let what's happening in the world stop you from moving forward. There's still a chance that nothing will happen, right? And you'll continually be moving forward as that nothingness occurs, which means you'll still be better off in the long run because of those decisions you're making right now. But if something happens, regardless, at least you were in the process of progressing, which means you might have had access to more resources or a better situation for yourself in the meantime, right? So like there's a lot of things to consider, but keep bettering yourself. Keep doing the best you can to keep moving forward, and we'll all try our best to get out on the other side of this, right? So I hope you had a good Monday night. I know I definitely did. Thank you all very much for being here. Like I said, if you're on replay crew, you're the GOATs. Thanks for coming back and watching and getting involved with the information here. And I think that's going to be it for tonight. So keep doing what you got to do. Thank you all very much. And that's going to be it for Magic Prepper.